recognizable John Jones, the Manhunter from Mars, his world, and the vile menagerie of villains he must confront.
Webster's defines multiverse as a theoretical reality that includes a possible infinite number of parallel universes. Webster's defines Multiversity as a very large university with many component schools, colleges, or divisions, and widely diverse functions. Grant Morrison can't read a dictionary. For the purposes of this Superblog team-up crossover, we're going to pretend that Multiversity is defined as stories that relate to parallel realities within a comic book universe. At DC Comics, Multiversity begins with the imaginary stories, which I believe got started in the 1950s. Obviously, comic books are all imaginary stories, but they have a continuity, and there are some things that are considered part of that continuity and some things that are outside of it. An imaginary story was up front and saying, look, this is basically a fairy tale that just happens to feature your favorite superheroes. Just go with it. Marvel Comics has had entire ongoing series based on that premise, most specifically the What If title. And then DC Comics had a long-lived line of prestige format specials and miniseries, which they referred to as Elseworlds. As with most things DC, the Elseworlds were dominated by stories involving Batman and Superman. So much so that all the other Elseworlds featuring every other character combined would maybe equal the number of Superman's Elseworlds. The Manhunter from Mars is clearly not at the same level of Superman and Batman, but thanks to his prominent role in the JLA, he managed to sneak into a fair few of these parallel universe stories, these Elseworlds, and we're going to take a look at the multiversity of Martian Manhunter today. Now, in the interest of specificity and brevity, I'm going to try to focus on the more imaginative, imaginary stories. Martian Manhunter has appeared in a lot of alternate timelines. For instance, he had an important role in a 1993 Legion of Superheroes story arc, which was set in the 30th century. But at the time that story was written and drawn, the intention was for that to be the real reality, the real future of the DC Universe. So we would want to throw that out, even though that continuity has been rebooted and revised countless times since. I'm also going to avoid stories where the Martian Manhunter is in his classic mode, very recognizable as the hero that was featured in JLA comics of the 80s, 90s, and so forth, when he happened to be traveling to a parallel dimension, like when he hung out with the Looney Tunes characters, when he would go to the Marvel Universe, Masters of the Universe, things like that, because it seems to me to defeat the purpose of delving into multiversity if we're just going to go with a clearly recognizable, familiar Martian Manhunter. By extension, I'll also be excluding clearly branded Elseworlds like The New Frontier or JLA Act of God. Both very interesting stories, both recommended, but both also feature the Martian Manhunter of multimedia that everybody knows. JSA The Liberty File was a 2-issue miniseries published in 2000, written by Dan Jolly and Tony Harris with art by Harris and Ray Snyder. Set in 1942, versions of the Batman, Hourman, Dr. Midnight, and Mr. Terrific are trying to keep the Nazis from utilizing an Ubermensch, or Superman, to win World War II. It turns out that the Superman they're seeking is actually the Martian Manhunter, who is only working with the Nazis because he'd been tricked by Hitler and had only seen the world through Hitler's viewpoint. When Batman manages to reveal his own worldview to the Martian Manhunter, John Jones turns on the Nazis and helps to defeat them. 1995's Batman Mightfall by Alan Grant and Kevin O'Neill introduced the Martian Manhunter Mite, who joined the considerably more famous Bat-Mite in battling the Bane Mite. Jones was a pathetic tentacled creature in 2001's JLA Riddle of the Beast by Alan Grant and too many artists to list. It's a terrible book, don't worry about it. The classic JLA lineup is sometimes referred to as the Magnificent Seven, and 1997's Elseworlds Justice writers took that fairly literally by casting the Justice League International heroes in a Western. It was written by Chuck Dixon with art by J.H. Williams III, which is the main draw of the book, and John Jones played the mysterious man with no name type character. The 1999 hardcover Son of Superman by Howard Chaykin, David Tishman, and J.H. Williams III features a black-clad Martian Manhunter leading the JLA in a dark dystopian future. If you suspect that, given the writers, the story has an unsavory take on John Jones, it's a pretty safe assumption. Superman Distant Fires by Howard Chaykin, Gil Kane, and Kevin Nolan features a depowered Martian Manhunter as a mentor figure in a dark dystopian future who dies in a fire. Because in Superman alternate timeline, universe, dimension stories, Martian Manhunter always dies in a fire. I vaguely remember a Martian popping up in 2002's Planetary JLA Terra Occulta by Warren Ellis, Jerry Ordway, and David Barron. I don't recall the details. It was probably defeatist and depressing because Warren Ellis wrote it. I can't remember if John Jones actually appears in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Strikes Again from 2001, or he just popped up in sketchbooks as a tired shut-in in an old man sweater in a dark dystopian future. But I think we've all agreed that we don't want to remember that The Dark Knight Returns ever had a sequel, and let's stick with that, shall we? Martian Manhunter had a very small role in the well-regarded miniseries Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. As I recall, Waid and Ross were in a conflict as to how to use the Martian Manhunter in the series, since they wanted the chief conflicts to be between Captain Marvel, Superman, as well as Superman being caught between the ideologies of Batman and Wonder Woman. So bringing in another extremely powerful hero would have thrown that balance out of whack. So Kurt Busiek suggested that they manage to write John Jones out by having him open his mind to the world so he could truly become human, and he would then fracture his mind so that he was basically mentally unstable from that point onward in a dark dystopian future. So that's his small part to play in that miniseries. 1999's three-issue Flashpoint miniseries by Pat McGreal and Norm Brayfogle was better than average, definitely more elaborate. It's centered around DC's Silver Age heroes like Barry Allen, Ralph Dibny, and of course John Jones, living in a parallel, somewhat utopian reality where the Flash had saved President Kennedy from assassination at the cost of his own mobility, and one Van Savage was manipulating things behind the scenes. In this reality, John Jones's Mars had been destroyed by a science priest tapping into the Speed Force, and he was fighting to save the Earth from a similar fate. The unrelated three-issue 2011 miniseries, Flashpoint The Outsider, featured a reality where the Martian Manhunter was captured and tortured by the Indian supervillain Michael Desai. This Manhunter tried to return the brutality visited upon him to the Outsider, probably the most famous, infamous, and influential Multiversity stories to feature the Martian Manhunter was Alan Moore's proposed follow-up to The Watchmen, Twilight, sometimes subtitled Twilight of the Superheroes. In it, the various DC heroes had divided control of the world among different royal houses in a dark dystopian future, one of the most powerful being the House of Thunder, which was of course ruled by Captain Marvel. The proposal was written in the late 80s before Alan Moore's falling out with DC Comics, and in fact Moore shopped it around to a variety of companies trying to adapt it to their heroes, memorably the Ultraverse line. But had it seen print, it would have been one of the most important Martian Manhunter stories ever, as he was a pivotal figure in the conclusion of the tale. It's tough to spoil a story that will never see the light of day, but in case you ever want to go seek out this tale, which is available on the internet despite Warner Brothers' repeated attempts to suppress it, spoiler space. Because of his connection to Captain Marvel, Billy Batson's body never ages, but his mind does. And this leads him to some unsavory activity, including frequenting prostitutes. Well, one time he picks up a call girl who turns out to be a shape-shifting Manhunter from Mars who snaps Billy Batson's neck in throes of passion and then assumes his identity. Part of the big finale is that Martian Manhunter, in the role of Captain Marvel, is battling to the death with the Man of Steel. Sometimes I wonder how perception of the Martian Manhunter would have been affected by the story if it had been released, but let's be honest, that battle to the death, we know who actually dies. It's really not all that different from any other Superman Elseworlds, is it?
Your ego betrays you. Will you not listen to reason? This won't end well for you.
Do you enjoy parallel worlds and alternate realities? Who doesn't? That's why the Superblog Team-Up will devote their January 2015 crossover to Multiversity. Get strung out on string theory with these amazing blogs. The conjoined Amazing Spider Talk, Chasing Amazing, and Superior Spider Talk will discuss the Spider-Man miniseries Reign. Between the pages, we'll take you to A Tale of Two Cities on the Edge of Forever. Bronze Age babies ask you to join them on a magical mystery tour of the multiverse with Things Are a Little Different Around Here. Firestorm Fan will take on the Nuclear Man on Infinite Earths with Countdown Arena. Floto's page will examine an Earth 1, Earth 2 team-up featuring Green Lantern. In My Not So Humble Opinion, we'll explore the many worlds of Tesla Strong. The Legion of Super Bloggers will look into Star Trek Legion of Superheroes. Longbox Graveyard will dig up X-Men number 141 and 142, Days of Future Past. The Marvel Superheroes podcast will uncover Epic Comics, Shadowline Saga Star, Dr. Zero. The Mystery Vlog will look at Marvel and DC's secret crossover, Avengers 85 through 86, the first appearance of Squadron Supreme. Superhero Satellite will shine a light on Marvel Comics' Star Comics line in Licensed Reality and Parallel Properties. The Ultraverse Network will take you to Altered Reality, the Ultraverse before and after Black September. And the Unspoken Decade does the math on 5 Batmen, 1 Superman, 0 Hour. Links to these wonderful podcasts, vlogs, and blogs can be found at the blog of this podcast. We received a WordPress blog like from Charlton Hero, retweets from Ange, Between the Pages, Bob at RJ Holmes123, Count Druncula, Guano Man, Knowing Flame Comics, Oscar Olalde, and Ryan C. at Trash Film Guru. Favorites came from Count Druncula, Date Night at Red City Images, Eternal Rage, The Irredeemable Shag, Luke Skywalker Dobb, Mark Burkhart, Martin Gray, Oscar Olalde, Sean Corey, Simon Donovan, Siskoid, and the Top 5 Road Crew.